Hi, my name is Elizabeth Saunders, and I will be presenting on the importance of female economic recognition. I am a senior at Roosevelt High School. So this semester I had the opportunity to take a class through an online platform called edX, and I took the class International Women's Health and Human Rights, taught by Professor Anne Firth-Murray of Stanford University. She teaches women and gender studies courses at Stanford. So every week I would do a portion of her online class focused on a specific human right or area of women's health that was very important to her and very important to women worldwide. I would then take that learning and blog about it and share in our Friday Share and Connect sessions, where I would share what I learned and connect it to the learning of my classmates. So I decided to take International Women's Health and Human Rights because of the experiences I have had doing other research projects. My junior year, I took AP Seminar, and in AP Seminar, I did a project on oppression of women in the United States, and I also did a project on dowries and their effects, studying specifically dowries in India and how they are affecting women today. So women's rights internationally and just studying women has been one thing that I've always really enjoyed. I also benefited a lot from class discussion when deciding what to focus on for my thesis, because my peer Kariana did her topic on microloans. So I really enjoyed listening about what she thought about economic empowerment for women, and then realizing how I could tie my learning to that and even build upon it even more. So that led me to my working thesis of the lack of representation of women in the global economy has led to human rights violations. So in order to investigate this thesis, I'm going to focus first on representation of women within the global economy. So I'm going to break that down into two parts, economic theory and then GDP, or global domestic production, to really investigate how women have been excluded from the global economy. So first I'm going to talk about economic theory. Economic theory was kind of started, and the base of economic theory was started with Adam Smith when he wrote The Wealth of Nations in 1776. The Wealth of Nations outlined a lot of concepts about why we can study economics and why we can, why we can predict behaviors of people. And so his big takeaway was that we can predict the actions of everyone because we are all acting out of our own self-interest. So for example, when I go to make dinner, I'm going to need groceries. So I'll go to the grocery store and pick up vegetables and maybe some chicken. And the farmers that produce those vegetables and chicken were all acting out of their own self-interest. So they were not producing those vegetables to help people like me have dinner. They were producing those vegetables for their own economic gain. And the same goes for the people working at the grocery store, and the same would even go for my making food. I'm making that solely for my gain, not share with anyone in my family. I'm acting out of my own self-interest. So this was the major flaw of his base of economic theory, because truly only people under the age of 5 act solely out of self-interest. So right off the bat, economic theory is flawed, and it's also flawed in a way that disproportionately affects women. So it's flawed because when we think of self-interest, over time, this has evolved into the idea of an economic man. So Homo economicus is a hypothetical person who behaves in exact accordance with their rational self-interest. So this is an assumption we make. We say everyone is acting solely out of their own self-interest. And this is really problematic, as I said before, because nobody really acts solely out of self-interest. And it's also a problem because the ideas of the economic man are that he's acting out of his own self-interest. So he's rational, he's detached, he's competitive. He wants to do the things that are going to most benefit him. Whereas women, and those are the same ideas that we teach men in society today. Whereas we teach our women and our girls to be emotional, we want them to be dependent on others, learn how to work in teams and really gain from others. And we want our females to sacrifice things. We want them to sacrifice their time to make dinner. We want them to sacrifice their bodies to have children. We want them to really do all these things, and none of those are the characteristics of an economic man. So they're also not characteristics that are seen positively within economics. So when a woman is emotional, dependent, or sacrificial, or she's taking her time to do things that are not out of her self-interest. For example, Smith's mother took care of him his entire life. She was a widowed mom. When she would make dinner, she was not acting out of her own self-interest, we can assume. We can assume she was trying to take care of her son, and she was trying to care for him. So this is why women have not been seen positively within economics from the beginning. So this is really problematic because it led to a lack of recognition in global domestic production. So the rules of GDP were drawn up in 1953 by a group of wealthy Western men. And so these wealthy Western men decided we should have a system to track how productive people are being and how much different countries and different areas of the economy are really contributing to our economy and our finances as a country. So global domestic production is defined as the total monetary or market value of all the finished goods and services produced within a country's borders in a specific time period. So we can think of it as like an economic scorecard. So in this picture, we can see that the United States are doing great. You know, we're really contributing to the global economy. China's doing pretty great too, whereas some smaller countries are not contributing to the global economy. They're lazy, they're not pulling their weight, they're not contributing to the economy. And the ideas of we're all acting out of our self-interest. If we think about this from the perspective of a wealthy Western man who drew up the rules, the countries that are smaller in this diagram and are not contributing as much, they're not pulling their weight, they're probably being really lazy, not doing any work, when in reality that's not the truth at all, because non-primary producers are not included in calculations of GDP. So whenever you complete any type of work that you're not getting paid for, that is not reflected within GDP. So if you think about, if we use the grocery shopping example again, if I'm going to the grocery stores to pick up food, I'm cooking dinner, all of that time I'm being unproductive, I'm being lazy, I'm not contributing to society. This is really problematic because a lot of the times these are the roles that women do. More than 1/3 of the world's households depend solely on women for income and necessities. So this is really difficult for women because we are seen as being lazy. We are non-primary producers in the rules of GDP. We're not valued at all. Any of the work that is not, if you are not selling something or providing a service that you are getting paid for, no matter the legality, because legality does not matter in GDP. So it's better for you in the rules of economics to illegally sell drugs than for you to cook for your family. And childcare is one of the biggest portions of GDP that is not included, because if you care for your children, you're not getting paid to care for your children. And that is a task that women often do. So if we look at unpaid work in women as a whole, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development said that while women spend about 271 minutes doing unpaid work, men only do about 137 minutes of unpaid work each week. So this is, it really shows the difference between the amount of unpaid work women and men do. And if we are not giving any value to this unpaid work, we are not giving any value to our women for doing this unpaid work. And these numbers, while as a country, the difference is around 130 hours, as in some countries, especially developing countries, this difference is a lot greater. So again, unpaid work is not reflected within GDP. And if it was, unpaid work is it would be the largest sector of work in most countries. In Australia, the largest sector of the economy, if it were to be measured, would be unpaid childcare, followed by unpaid work, finally followed by any other category. So first you have your biggest chunk is unpaid childcare, your next biggest chunk is all other unpaid work, and that's finally followed by your retailing, your manufacturing, your services. In the United Kingdom, unpaid work is the equivalent of all manufacturing and retailing. And if we look at the global economy, if we included unpaid work, the global economy could increase by 11 trillion US dollars. And this is really important because if most of this unpaid work is being done by women and this work is not being reflected in the main way we keep track of if we're being productive in society and if we're contributing to something greater than ourselves, if we're contributing to the global economy, is an area that women's work is never reflected, then automatically we're setting our women at a disadvantage and we're not reflecting the great work that they're doing. So while women perform 66% of the world's work, they only earn 10% of the world's income, and they own about 1% of the world's property. So while women are performing so much work, you don't see those figures. When you are learning about economics, when you're learning about anything in school, you're not hearing, oh, women are doing this great thing. You hear about how women only have 10% of the world's income or 1% of the world's property, and those are the things you visually see when you're in a community. So in a lot of developing countries, it's not visible the amount of work that women are doing, because a lot of that work is domestic or it's within the home, and it's obviously not getting paid, so it's not very public. Whereas it is very public who has the most income, and it's very public who owns property, who has the best property, and women are not in any of those positions. So this leads me to the next category, which is human rights violations against women. So I think I've pretty clearly outlined how women are not reflected at the same rate as men in our economy. So I'm going to show how that lack of recognition within our economy has led to a lack of social status for women. It's negatively impacted women's social status around the world, and social status has had a very large impact on a few specific problems that I will give some more insight to that are human rights violations against women. It's very important to understand why economic recognition is important to social status. So locally, if women are doing work that they're not getting paid for, they're obviously not getting any recognition for it. And also, when there are opportunities for paid work, it's less likely that a woman has had paid work in the past. It's more likely that she's been doing unpaid work, so it's more difficult for her to get opportunities. And it's also a lot easier for employers in those opportunities to create unsafe standards, and also it's very likely that they will not get any benefits or any job security. And because they have not been used to that, and their female peers have not been used to that, it's accepted as normal and creates a cycle where women are either doing unpaid work, or they're in a paid environment that's really not safe or very productive for them. And then globally, the invisibility of women's work has led to a marginalization of women beyond the economy, because globally we see that women are obviously not contributing to GDP. And when we only focus on GDP and economic theory, it seems as if women are being lazy, and they should not be treated the same as the men who are carrying our society, despite the fact that women do 66% of the world's work. So one major human rights violation is female infanticide and sex-selective abortion. So obviously, the right to life is a very important human right. So female infanticide is when very early in a child's infancy, they are killed because of their gender, in this case because they're female. And sex-selective abortions occur if a mother has an ultrasound or knows the gender of her baby, and so based off that, she decides to pursue an abortion. So we know these happen based on a few different things. One of the greatest ways that we know this is through the sex ratio. So the sex ratio globally, the global expectation for a sex ratio is about 106 males to 100 females. So that's saying if you have 212 males, you should have 200 females, just based off data, based off science. However, in China and India, there are about 115 males per every 100 males, based on data gathered by the United Nations and a few other organizations. So it's very clear that in China and India, there is some form of female infanticide or sex-selective abortions, and it's very difficult to track female infanticide. Female infanticide occurs a lot more often in rural areas because those women do not have access to ultrasounds, whereas it's a lot easier to track sex-selective abortions because a doctor is recording or somebody is recording the gender given at the ultrasound, and then if the baby is carried to term. There's also, this leads to a preference, there is a preference for male children globally. Even in the United States, a study showed that couples were more likely to get divorced if they had one male child rather than one female child. So because women so this connects to women in the economy, because obviously women are undervalued. Women have been doing all this work and they've been getting little to no recognition. So it's very problematic because although women are doing all of this work and they are doing all this, they're not getting any credit. So then it seems as if they're really lazy. They really cannot contribute to it. If they cannot contribute to the global economy, how are they going to contribute to a family? So because of this, it's more likely that you want to have a male because they can make money for you. They can formally make a very large difference, whereas informally, women obviously have a very big impact. The United Nations Development Program also found that infant boys are fed more adequately than infant girls in poor areas and in poor families. So women are being undervalued within our economy, and because they are undervalued in our economy, it seems as if they have less potential than men, which leads to things like female infanticide and sex-selective abortions, because women are not seen as important or contributors to our economy or our society as a whole. The next category is reproductive health. So reproductive health I'm going to cover a few things. A big one is maternal mortality. So that is when a mother dies giving birth. As you can see in this picture, I apologize, it's a bit blurry, from the World Health Organization. It's the maternal mortality per 100,000 live births in 2000. As you can see, as it gets darker, there's more maternal mortality. So it's more common in developing nations, and it's also more common in areas where women are less valued, because when a woman is giving birth, it's a lot of the times the child is given more value than the mother themselves, because if the child is a boy, they have the potential to contribute to society, contribute to the economy. Maternal mortality, there's also a big issue because around 15 million girls marry before the age of 18, and early marriage is, it has been tied to how a lot of the times if a girl in your family is not going to make money by selling her off through dowries, or just when she is married, she's no longer a burden for your family. So a lot of girls are married when they're young, and maternal mortality is 2 to 5 times higher in women under 18 than when they're over 20. So when women have no value in society and their only value is potentially bringing a boy into this world, when they are married younger for the purpose of having children, it's very dangerous to their health, because they're at a greater risk when they are giving birth when they are younger, rather than giving birth at an age when they choose to get married and choose to have children. Around 350,000 women die each year from preventable illnesses, and that goes beyond reproductive health and maternal mortality. Another large area of reproductive health is family planning. So in Ecuador, they had an initiative through the World Health Organization to have female health clinics in a lot of communities to ensure that maternal mortality could decrease, and also women had access to birth control and other family planning measures. However, because women were so undervalued, it was seen as negative, and they were shamed if they were seen going into one of these clinics in their own communities. So women who wanted to have birth control or somehow have a measure of reproductive health would have to go to neighboring communities and walk upwards of 10 to 20 miles just to receive basic health care, because it is seen so negatively. How dare a woman try to provide for herself or receive health care? And in Ethiopia, a lot of local healthcare professionals were trained to give Depo-Provera injections, which is a form of birth control that's very discreet. And they were taught to do that because women were not allowed to receive birth control or seek out any of those measures, because their goal in life should be to bring in successful men into this world. And so it was seen as really negative that they would possibly want to plan around their own health or their own wants. Finally, we have war and refugee settings. War disproportionately affects women greatly. In 2008, a United Nations military advisor was quoted saying, modern day war is more dangerous for women than for soldiers. It's really dangerous because a lot of acts protecting women, so acts against rape, against violence, a lot of that goes out the door when you no longer have any type of enforcement. So rape rates increase a lot during war. In Afghanistan in 1996, the Taliban banned women from 22 out of 23 hospitals within their country, and they also prevented female healthcare workers from working. So that's kind of an example of how during wartime, whoever's in control really has control over women's health. And that's really problematic when you have women who are pregnant or women have very real and very necessary needs for healthcare that they are not able to receive just because they are women. Afghanistan during that time and still currently has the highest maternal mortality rate in the world. There's also a big issue because when women try to flee these war situations, they are often brought into human trafficking, or they are enticed into human trafficking in some way, which is a very large violation of human rights because they do no longer have the right to not be in involuntary servitude or slavery. And if they successfully escape their area or their situation and they make it to a refugee camps are often very unsafe and also unsanitary for if they have any medical procedures they need to have. They're also very unsafe because there's a very high rate of rape and other sexual violence within refugee settings against women, and a higher rate of sexual violence against women rather than against men. So this brings me back to my final slide of the lack of representation of women in the global economy has led to human rights. And I think I've really outlined this by showing how women have never been represented in the economy, which led to rules within global domestic production that disproportionately negatively affected women. And because women were disproportionately negatively affected in the rules where we dictate how important a figure is to our economy and how important a figure is to our society, that led to women not having very much importance in a lot of areas. And it led to this idea that women are of less value than men. And when women are of less value than men, then different things like female infanticide, sex-selective abortions, violence against women, and not providing adequate health care are justified in the minds of people who do not believe women deserve the same rights as men. So that is kind of how I believe I've showed the lack of representation of women in the global economy has led to human rights violations, but I look forward to hearing your thoughts in my Q&A session coming up. Jot down any questions you have. I'm excited to see you all. Thank you.